mine and don't necessarily reflect the thoughts of my employer. Standard disclaimer. Although obviously there's a lot of overlap there, given what we've done at the company. A little bit about myself. Andrew Clinton, 18 years in the greater IT space. Past 10 of that heavily focused in security roles. I've held a wide range of positions: Windows, Linux, security, sysadmin type positions, security engineering, pen tester, consultant, PCI QSA for a few years. I've worked as director of security for now 2 separate companies. Currently, I'm director of cybersecurity at Avion Healthcare. Hold 2 many certifications, some of which I'm happy with, some are all right. College dropout, and got lots of expensive hobbies that I don't really have time for. And the great example is right there at the bottom. And I want to talk a little bit about my team, because as we're kind of gearing up for how to go beyond purple, I think I need to talk about my team first. At Avion, I'm fortunate that both divisions, red and blue, report up to me. My team is kind of think is roughly divided into incident response and vulnerability management. It's a whole lot that gets fit into that incident response side. SIM engineering, security engineering, threat hunting, and of course incident response as well. Vulnerability management tends to encompass all of internal vulnerability scanning, external vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, as well as kind of facilitating and coordinating third-party assessments and third-party penetration testing. So definitely a strong mix of red and blue, but we're all on the same team. So heavy focus on collaboration, no silos within my group. Everyone's kind of involved, and everyone works together. It's a great scenario. We're on the same stand-up calls every morning. Our sprints are in alignment. We perform frequent purple team operations, and sometimes I think of purple team operation, it's almost on the scale of a pen test. It's a bigger thing. Where you kind of, red team does their stuff, and then they go back to blue and have a conversation about it. That's not really how we operate. Our purple team ops are kind of smaller in scale, but far more frequent, far more iterative. Say we've got a monthly cadence, but it goes beyond that. Lots of collaboration between both sides of that equation. Red team works with blue to validate security controls and kind of make recommendations, and blue team works with red. It's a great 2-way relationship that has led us to a lot of quick maturity over the past couple of years. So beyond purple, what do we even mean by that? So kind of baseline here. When I say purple, I really mean enhanced information sharing between red and blue teams. Okay, that collaboration that kind of shares perspectives and leads to increased effectiveness. If a defender has a better idea of what an attacker is doing, they're going to have a better understanding of how to defend against it, and vice versa. If an attacker understands how a defender is working, they can tune their attacks to tailor it to the environment, tailor it to the situation, and kind of drive those results further. Maximizing effectiveness and getting the most out of that relationship. In this talk, I want to kind of cover taking that philosophy of sharing understanding, sharing information, and I want to expand it outside of security. I want to take it and talk about things we've done at Aviana, a couple of scenarios where we've worked with teams outside of security to increase communication, to do more knowledge transfers, and to break down communication barriers and drive more effective results and broader understanding. I want to say across the organization, but we're some of the the examples we'll step through are with some specific teams. So it's definitely a heavy focus for us. We want to make sure that everyone's talking, everyone's working with each other, and that we're kind of increasing understanding across the board. So I mean, in short, this is a talk about talking to people. I hope everyone is excited. A couple of key points I want to touch on. I think some of the real significant advantages, some of the things we've been able to achieve with kind of the actions we've taken across these kinds of cases. I'll be stepping through is showing new perspectives to people, kind of taking theory and turning into reality for some. Two-way knowledge transfers is a big one. Getting separate teams to talk and walk away with a deeper understanding is huge. Sometimes barriers go up, silos get established, and not much communication gets through. And then you've got independent teams doing their own thing, and that can be detrimental. So, and again, kind of breaking down barriers, encouraging communication. I think there's a short-term aspect of that, and then a long-term aspect of that. Sometimes you just get some friction that happens between teams, and they're not talking as much as they should. How can we work to approach that and encourage more communication so that we can avoid animosity or friction? And then, what can we do from a long-term communication standpoint? Because I think that's where real collaboration comes into play. So I wanted to acknowledge a couple of challenges. There's a lot of companies out there that struggle with cross-team collaboration. I've seen it firsthand. I've heard stories from other colleagues. I think one of the things that stands out to me a lot is siloed teams. You get teams working independently of each other. Everyone's got their own specialty, and so there's some natural tendency to move in the direction of silos. Kind of leave me alone. I'm working on my thing. But that can be detrimental. It kind of lead to echo chambers and not really understanding what other teams are doing. And another issue is communications being filtered through leadership. Sometimes senior leadership doesn't want engineering talking to engineering. Division of duties feeds into that, and then sometimes corporate culture just isn't really facilitating of open communication. And there's a lot of impacts to this as well. And this is kind of a short slide covering some high-level items, but the misalignment of goals. If we're not talking to each other, we don't know what each other's doing, and maybe I'm working on a project that you're working on, and if we're not talking to each other about it, we're not working towards the same goals in the same way, and that can decrease efficiency and kind of harm the overall product. Friction between teams. If you're not talking, not relating to your fellow coworkers, sometimes hostility can kind of start to grow. If it's just status updates, hey, you finished that thing for me yet? That can lead to animosity and friction. Lost communication isn't a big one. You're just not talking. I think that feeds into barriers as well. And then I already touched on outright hostility and stonewalling. Hey, security keeps pestering me, so I don't want to talk to them anymore. They can go talk to my manager if they want to talk to me. As we kind of step into, before we get into the specific stories, I want to touch on the prerequisites. I think in my current position, current company, we're very, very fortunate in our corporate culture, and our leadership has enabled this sort of scenario where we can have that stronger cross-team collaboration. But as touched on in a couple of previous slides, that's not always the case. So I think there's a few prerequisites I wanted to touch on here. You can't have any leadership barriers. You don't want any VPs or directors standing in the way of communication. Toxic personalities. I know we all experience it from time to time. We all run into that guy that's really challenging to work with. You get one too many of those, and it can damage communication all around. We had another prerequisite is everyone's kind of working towards the same goal, whether they're aware of it or not. I think this is generally the situation. Working in a company, your goals tend to be aligned across the board, but it's definitely something we want to keep in mind. And then I think finally, the last prerequisite here is probably the most important, and it's time. A lot of us get overworked, overstressed. But the hard fact about trying to increase communication is you need more time for meetings and emails. And that's thrilling as that sounds. It's kind of part of the experience here. And maybe in short, this worked in my company. This has worked for us. Has worked really well for us. Happy to share these stories, but may not be perfect for every single scenario. So 4 stories I'll be kind of talking through today. This first one here is kind of a quick one. This picture is actually the only real picture in the slide deck. The rest have been swapped out for anonymity or kind of keeping confidential details away from the slide deck. But this is our senior pen tester conducting a wireless pen test, portion of it anyway, pointing a Yagi antenna at our corporate headquarters from way across the street. In context for this story was, I believe it was Q1 of last year. We were performing an internal wireless pen test. There wasn't a whole lot going on there. Wireless network was pretty secure, not a lot of vulnerabilities. It was an interesting pen test, but not a lot of exciting things. So we did some initial testing, discovery, mapping, and kind of figuring out what access points were where, what wireless devices were, what does consistency look like throughout the company. Did some preliminary attacks, but I think the real key thing that we decided to do here that had a huge impact was we scheduled a collaborative session with network engineering and the defensive security engineering team to do a collaborative kind of, I want to call it a workshop, but it was really more of a demo and screen share. And so we scheduled a meeting. I think it was maybe about an hour long. Wasn't too bad, but scheduling the meeting with the networking team and the defensive security team allowed us to fire up screen shares and show what everybody was doing, show everybody's perspective for this particular thing. And the scenario where wireless attacks are being performed on our network, what does the wireless system look like? So it was just a off the internet screenshot of I think it's Cisco Meraki Air Marshal. You're showing rogue SSIDs. This is the networking team's perspective. This, when they log into their equipment, this is what they see. They know that they can detect rogue SSIDs, rogue access points. They know that they can detect attacks, and but it doesn't happen a whole lot. So most of the time there's not much to look at here. But being able to have their system on the screen while the pen tester performing live attacks and generating info is kind of cool to see. See the board light up and see, okay, well, pen tester's doing this and I'm seeing that. It's a good experience. And then we're going to dip back into a little bit of purple here. We also had the defensive security engineers on the line. And that kind of allowed us to watch event generation or alarms. How does the system react? If a rogue access point is stood up, do we actually get an event? How can we validate those controls? And then of course the pen testers were able to do the screen share as well. And I think this was a real eye-opening moment. This was really cool to see, and I think a lot of fun for the network engineering team. Because they've got their interface. They conceptually know that hey, their system detects rogue access points or those sorts of things. They potentially detect deauthorization attacks any malicious activity. The wireless intrusion detection system does quite a bit. But how are those attacks performed? What does that look like? Most of them had never seen it, never touched it, never seen it performed in front of them. So this was a great experience. It wasn't pre-recorded. It was all live. It was, hey, I'm a fire up a remote access point. We're in the middle of the corporate office. Tell me what the wireless system does. And so it was kind of an eye-opening moment here. It changed theory into reality for the network engineering team. We get a lot of great questions throughout the session. Just kind of talking about how attacks are performed, what we should look out for, and it was a good conversation overall. Story two. In this kind of scenario, we had an internal web application with multiple vulnerabilities. Standard pen test discovered them. Remediation was pretty quickly queued up, and development started working on it. But one thing we were a little bit concerned about was it's always a business impact. We weren't getting any resistance to deploying remediation or updating the application. We were working closely with the development team and making good progress. But we knew that the business owners of the application and the users of the application were going to be impacted, a smaller group of internal users. And we kind of wanted to show them what was going on and why we were doing what we were doing. So we scheduled another kind of live demo. It was a live interactive session, maybe 30, 45 minutes. It was pretty quick. And we pulled up the report and we stepped through the finding. And this was really illuminating. Again, changing kind of theory into reality. And the business owners understand that, hey, there's vulnerabilities in the application, and they need to be fixed, but it's completely different to see it. And so in this scenario, our senior pen tester was able to our senior pen tester, sorry for the pause here. Sorry. Technical difficulties on my end. So in this scenario, our senior pen tester was able to step through the findings and really demonstrate what the results of what could be done with these issues. And so again, kind of changing that theory into reality. It's one thing to be told that there's vulnerabilities on your web application, but it's another thing to see a pen tester fire up SQL map and dump sensitive records right there in front of your eyes. And this was a technical demonstration for non-technical business leadership, but it still had a substantial impact. It really kind of showed them, hey, this is why we're doing this. This is why we go through these efforts. This is why we test for vulnerabilities and why we're working towards remediation. This is why your web application is going to be down for a day or two as we're pushing out upgrades. And story number 3 here, senior engineering meetings. Last year, we kind of had a pretty substantial workload on both the security and the infrastructure side. As we were working through some heavy-handed compliance goals across the board. It was there's a lot of work being done, and there was a lot of projects that were somewhat intertwined. And in this particular situation that kind of spawned this discussion was we had security engineering waiting on infrastructure to complete some of their projects, and we had infrastructure waiting on security to complete some of their projects. And in a remote work environment, what that kind of translates to is the security agile sprint is a week long. The infrastructure agile sprint is 2 weeks long. And so once a week, security emails infrastructure and says, hey, you finished that thing for me yet? and so twice throughout their sprint cycle, infrastructure is getting nuisance emails. And then vice versa is somewhat true as well. The infrastructure teams look into security. Hey, did you finish this thing yet? Did you finish those dashboards in the SimForest yet? And when that's all the communication that's happening, friction starts to build up. Yeah, no, I'm waiting on so and so. It's been weeks. It's been weeks. And then I'm waiting on him to do this thing for me, and he keeps pestering me about this other thing. And it really was a breakdown of communication. It was, everyone had their heavy workloads, and so they're kind of focusing on their own work and not understanding the perspective of the other individual, and not necessarily blaming anyone for this scenario. It's just kind of an emergent property of kind of, hey, we all had a lot of work, and we're all kind of pushing each other to try to get to the next step. So the answer was pretty obvious. We needed to increase the communication between some of these guys. So we established a standing meeting between infrastructure and security engineering, and there wasn't a set. There's no set agenda. There's no set goal. It's a bi-weekly cadence. Somewhat in alignment with agile sprints, because that kind of lines up the projects and updates and keeping PMs happy. But no managers, just senior engineers. Senior engineers know how to talk to senior engineers. I don't need to be involved here. These guys are all working towards the same goals, and they just need to chat and make sure that they're not kind of make sure that the communication between these teams is more than just status updates and hey, you finished that thing for me yet? So this is actually an ongoing standing meeting. I think we're still getting fantastic results out of it, even if it's just encouraging communication between the teams. So they get into these bi-weekly meetings, and I think sometimes there's a little bit of an agenda. There's projects on the board that need to be discussed. Sometimes I think the conversation is more casual. Hey, what are you working on this week? We're all technical. Both sides of engineering focus on technical tasks. Everything's interesting. What's the cool project that's in the pipeline? But it also kind of gives them an opportunity to talk about what's on the horizon. What are we going to be working on in a couple of months? Or what are the ideas we're playing around with? It's helped us get ahead of some challenges, where security may be rolling out a project that's going to have a more substantial infrastructure impact. We need to deploy a new IDS system, and that's gonna take 3 server deployments. Well, that's an impact infrastructure. We can discuss it in these meetings so that it's on their radar as soon as possible, and there's some preliminary discussion. It kind of eases some of those tensions and increases efficiency overall. And then, of course, how can we help each other out? There's been some great examples between these two teams over the past couple of years. There's tools that they use, that infrastructure uses, that can help us, and there's tools that security uses that can help infrastructure. And where's that overlap, and how can we increase that collaboration? And I think another point I kind of wanted to make here, and with the first two scenarios, it's kind of standoff or standalone scenarios, one-off meetings. This is a cadence, and I think as we kind of talk through implementing these, or having these meetings, you're having a long-term effect. You're opening up communication. You're encouraging more communication. So this one in particular, this biweekly cadence is a big one. It kind of gives that conversation space. But even in the previous two, you're encouraging ongoing communication, even if it's just a one-off meeting, with the business owners and users of an application. Suddenly they know security exists, and they know what security does, and so they're going to be more likely to pick up the phone, send that email, and ask questions later on. Hey, you guys did that session 3 months ago. can we do another one? Because I want to better understand, what's going on over here, or can we talk through some things, or we just implemented multi-factor on this application. Why? Might be some really valid questions from users that want to make sure that security has an open door and that people are comfortable approaching us, and kind of we want to foster that long-term communication so that we can collaborate with all the different teams across the business, and have a more effective result. And this is a bigger story, and kind of my favorite. Saved it for last. Pen testing and development integration. So last year we had an external party do a pen test for one of our applications, one of our internal applications, and they came back with, I want to say it was an overwhelming amount of findings, but there was plenty of findings. Some of them were fairly complex, and some of the complexity here had to deal with legacy code issues, standard challenges that a lot of us run into. We were pretty quickly, we established resources and budget, and secured the budget and resources required for remediation, and tied that to a timeline. Somewhat aggressive timeline. There's a variety of risks in play with the application, but really we just kind of wanted to make sure that we processed this hardy list of vulnerabilities in an effective manner. So how do we do that? We've got some complex vulnerabilities that are a little difficult to explain. Understanding how they interact with back-end code is a challenge, because legacy code that's not necessarily being not necessarily the most exercised by the current development team. So how do we bridge some of these knowledge gaps, and make sure that the developers understand the attacks, understand the security implications and those scenarios, and how do we queue up effective remediation and work in a reasonable timeline so we can meet the deadline and move on to other projects. Well, I think let's have the pen testers and devs hang out a lot. So stepping into the remediation process, and single slide covering months worth of work. After discussions with the development teams and leadership, and kind of the best way to approach this, we integrated the pen testing team into the development teams. And so the pen testers joined the daily stand-ups and weekly sprint planning from development teams, and pen testers joined the development Slack channels, because that's where most of the development communication was going on. I don't want to understate the impact here. We've got several development teams, each with their own set of stand-ups and sprint planning. That's a huge burden for a short list of pen testers. It's a lot of new meetings every single day. But the team did a great job, and this really threw open the fire hose in terms of communication between the teams. The pen testers were heavily involved, understanding how things are being prioritized, what fixes are being worked on. There's active communication between developers and pen testers to talk about, hey, we're looking at implementing this as a fix for this vulnerability. What do you guys think about that? Is that going to be effective? There's a lot of great discussion. So there's kind of smaller fixes for more spot issues, and then there were certain scenarios where we had recurring issues throughout the application, and we needed to discuss larger fixes that were broader. And I think that this relationship really helped facilitate those conversations, where we could talk about, do we is not a specific example, but do we run through the full list of cross-site scripting vulnerabilities and remediate those inputs one by one, or do we try to find a broader approach that takes care of everything in one style swoop. And there was a lot of great discussions in this time frame about the pros and cons of different types of remediation, and how do we approach it. And I think it was illuminating to the development teams, how the pen testers operated, and kind of help the development teams understand, well, if you fix it this way, we can still get around the fix, versus if you fix it that way, that's far more robust and is going to keep me from getting back in. And vice versa. This relationship really helped the pen testers gain deeper understanding. We can talk about white box testing, but this kind of goes beyond white box testing, because it's active communication with the developers maintaining the code. So there's scenarios where the pen tester is going to have questions. If I initiate this function and drop this input in there, what happens on the back end? And they had a direct line of communication into the teams that understood the back end functionality and what the implications of it would be. But to kind of bringing this portion to a close, that open communication really helps streamline remediation across the board. It was kind of cool watching, especially at the tail end, as we're kind of getting into that remediation validation phase. Yeah. If there's so much conversation happening on the front end before remediations are designed and implemented, well, then by the time they're implemented, the pen testers already had eyes on it. We're confident in the results, and that final validation step is just like almost instantaneous. Yeah, no, we'll run the check again, but we know that it's the validation is going to be sound. And it was really kind of cool watching the final couple of months of this project, and we're just knocking out validation left and right. But again, constant communication between the teams really opened this up and kind of helped streamline all these processes, give us a much more robust remediation end result, and really kind of fostered the relationship between those teams. That's kind of brings me to my next slide. More buzzword synergy here, but that open two-way communication still exists. That project in particular was a big one, but it's come to a close. We wrapped it up at the end of last year, but the development team, the security team, they still talk all the time. We'll have developers proactively reaching out to security, again, via Slack, via other messaging, via emails. Hey, throw a meeting on the calendar. Hey, we're about to do this. Let's talk through it real quick. Make sure that we're doing this right, and that we've considered the attacker's perspective. And then on the opposite side, our pen testers, part of the vulnerability management team, and part of that is static and dynamic code analysis, which kind of is ongoing, and having that direct line, not just into the development teams, but to the developers, really helps with that. Hey, I ran a static code analysis on this older application, and we found static credentials in this file. What's up with that? And developer in Slack, and 2 seconds. Oh yeah, no, that code's no longer in use. I'll tag it in the next sprint just to delete the file. We found situations like that. So it's kind of this open communication has really helped us out long term in breaking down those barriers, establishing that two-way communication, and getting quick, effective results. So I ran through this a little more quickly than I was expecting, but kind of in conclusion, kind of touching on my 4 key points here again. There's a lot of benefit to kind of fostering this cross-team collaboration, and either having standalone meetings, or standing meetings, or integrating teams within other teams to kind of facilitate more communication. You can really can really show new perspectives. You can kind of take that theory into reality. So with the first two examples, pretty confident the network team had never seen the air crack suite, live and running in front of them before. They conceptually understood what the attacks were, but never seen them perform. And so it was an eye-opening experience to see, not only, hey, these are the attacks being performed, but these are the results. This is how my system reacts, and dang, the pen tester can do that quick. A similar situation in the second scenario, talking to the business owners of the application. Again, hey, we have these vulnerabilities. We need them fixed. Okay, cool. You guys fix them. But we want to take the time and show, hey, this is why we're fixing these vulnerabilities. This is the impact of some of these web application vulnerabilities, and this is how we dump sensitive data, or this is how we do cross-site scripting and hijack credentials, or this is why session handling is important, because it has this impact. And if you have somebody who normally works with sensitive data and they think that it's in a confined spot, and then you show them, a SQL injection attack that bypasses all the controls and dumps the contents of the database, and suddenly all that information that they thought was secure is right there on the screen. It can really illuminate the why. Why are we pushing these security initiatives, and how does that relate to them as the user of the application, or the business owner of the application. And then stepping into the security engineering, or the senior engineering meetings, as well as the development and security integration. Breaking down barriers and encouraging communication is huge. Kind of reached a point where teams are proactively reaching out to each other. Communication is streamlined, and it's fun, man. Like, we're all technical. We're all interested in the work that's being done, and so it's easy to talk to each other once the communication starts happening. And it's exciting because we all get to learn, and that's I think that makes everybody excited about things. It kind of helps us queue up new projects, helps us make effective use of everybody's time, and I think everybody gets to grow and learn throughout the whole process. All right, so that's my talk about talking to people. I hope I still have a few of you. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure here at CarolinaCon. You guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend.